Tell us a little bit about yourself so that our audience got to know you a little bit more.
In terms of where I am today, you know, I'm a happily married UK citizen living here in the United States on the New Hampshire seacoast, which is a beautiful part of the world. I have an 18-year-old daughter, I have a 17-year-old stepson, 15-year-old stepdaughter. We have 2 dogs and 1 cat, and live pretty much a relatively straightforward life. Busy, obviously. My personal life is very important to me, as is my professional life as well, but I'm a great believer that there has to be a balance. You know, in more recent times I've had the opportunity to be based working from home, which has been quite a new experience for me, because typically during my career I've travelled a lot, which has been fantastic, but at the same time you also you know, you kind of miss your home and miss the things that you aspire to. And when you actually get them, you don't give yourself the time to actually enjoy them. So certainly in the last 6 or 7 months I've had lots of opportunity to enjoy that and perhaps create a better balance in my life. But as you know, I'm originally from the United Kingdom. I've been over here in the US now for 4 years. I was born in a city on the northeast coast of England called Hull, my birth town. Hull is a very interesting place. It's a much maligned place within the UK. It's a fabulous place with fabulous people, and it's very diverse. But it's small, and it sits on an estuary. If you go to Hull, you've got to go to Hull for a particular reason, because you don't pass through Hull to get somewhere else. So in that regard, it's kind of a place that people only go to if they have a reason to go to, and they go and then they come back and they don't take the opportunity to particularly enjoy it. But I guess also because of that, some of the career opportunities there are potentially limited. And whilst I spent a lot of my early years living in the area and living in the north of England, I did kind of do the Dick Whittington and you know, move down to London in the late 80s, early 90s, you know, where the streets are paved with gold and you know, one's going to go and, you know, make one's fortune. And spent up until moving here to the United States, spent you know, almost 20 years living in the south of England, and you know, using that as a base and a home, and you know, my daughter was born there, etc.
Can you tell us a little bit what's your leadership style? And I also want to find out your insight on what makes a good leader.
I think this is a particularly interesting topic, because I think it's a very confusing topic for a lot of people that are leading organisations, whether that's from the perspective of a CEO or whether they're, you know, leading a team, you know. And the thing that's confusing is that I think that people actually, they're confused between the process of management and the need to lead. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to look at, you know, what do these words mean? You know, you can't actually start to execute on them, if you will, until you actually understand what the real true definitions are. And from the real true definitions, then you'll start to get an understanding of how you can understand how you're going to go about playing those roles out. And if you go into the Oxford English Dictionary, or over here into Webster's, and you look at the definition of the word manage or management, you'll see words like controlling and directing. If you go and have a look at the word leadership, you will see words like direction and influence. And for me, this kind of sums up the balance that a leader has to have. We have to manage. There are tactical things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis to understand how we're performing, what our milestones are, what our measurement against those milestones are. But we've also got to do that in such a way that we're influential within the people that we're working with. You know, my whole kind of philosophy within an organisation, and I personally believe in flat management structures, and the reason for that is because I see an organisation almost like a jigsaw puzzle. Every jigsaw puzzle is made up of a number of pieces, and each piece is unique. And that characterises the personalities that we have, the people that we work with, and the people that work in the teams that we're leading. Now, some of those pieces are quite pivotal. They may have a particular image that is very specific to the overall image that you're trying to build. Some of them might just be kind of blank and, a piece of, blue sky, for instance. But the reality is that when you put that whole jigsaw together, if you've got a piece missing, it doesn't really matter whether it's a piece of blue sky or whether it was actually something that was more integral to the overall image. The fact of the matter is that the picture is spoilt. So my great belief is that we have to have a responsibility to lead and manage in the same way for all our people, whether it be people in the sales organization that are very specifically pivotal to our results, or whether it's people that are supporting that. The fact of the matter is that everybody has to understand and not just what the vision of the organization is and how they as an individual working within a team-based environment have the opportunity to contribute to that and understand what their reward is for doing that, as well as the reward for the organization. But they've all got to be motivated in the same way, and they've all got to feel the same way about it. And I believe that you best do that by inspiring people.
What motivates people? How do you inspire people?
We as individuals, no matter what our roles, we have people around us that inspire us, and have done, almost from when we were born. We've been through schools, we've had particular teachers that have inspired us, that have motivated us, that have, taken what could be a very dry, boring subject and brought it to life and enabled us to do well because of the way in which they've inspired and motivated us to learn it. With our personal friends, there are people who have experiences. You can look on the television news every night and see people that inspire you because of their stories. There are lots of mechanisms that we can have as an individual in our life overall which can inspire us. And the trick for me, I believe, is to take those different vehicles for inspiration that inspire ourselves and to understand and use those to make sure that we inspire others in the same way. Because the likelihood is, if there is a particular technique or strategy that somebody has used to inspire you, then the likelihood is it will be something that you can use to inspire other people. And I think that's a particularly important thing. I mean, I talk to a lot of salespeople, I talk to a lot of business leaders and sales managers in particular, who ask me about this subject. And the first question I always ask them is, tell me, who's the person that inspired you most of all in your life? And tell me about them and tell me how they did it. Because the reality is that you can learn from that process. You've already been through that. One of the things that I always do if I'm delivering a workshop, group of salespeople might be, an audience of 10, 20 people, relatively small, very specific. The first thing that I do is I ask everybody to introduce themselves. They may know each other. And I ask them to talk about something that happened in their life that was they consider to be their greatest achievement. And there's a whole range of different answers to that question. Some people will talk about having my family was the greatest achievement, or climbing a high mountain, etc., etc. Now, the great beauty of that is that yes, it very much helps you understand what drives and motivates people. But if you understand what drives and motivates people through that kind of reality type question, if you will, you also start to understand a little bit about them that you can relate to and you can refer to. So, we might then have a coffee break and I might go and approach a couple of people. So tell me about the 3 children you were just telling me about. And people start to feel very comfortable about that. You start to create a platform to be inspirational to them because you're taking an interest, you're taking a note. And they feel that and they understand that.
When you are looking for salespeople, what are the qualities you're looking for? Or how do you define you have the right salesperson?
Huge question. Again, if you look at the definition of the word sales, what you'll get is some kind of response that's about, for an exchange of money for goods, services or whatever, you know. For me, sales is about positively influencing people. And, you know, let's kind of break that down. It's got to be positive. It has to be a positive experience. It has to be an honest and open experience, because if it's not sustainable, you know. Nobody wants a salesperson that just sells one order to one organisation and they did it so badly or so manipulatively that the customer will never come back and buy again. So it has to be a positive experience for both sides. And we've got to be influential, because actually the need for being influential is several-fold. The first one is, depending what you're selling and where you are, and here we are in the middle of New York City, you know, there are people buying things, you know, in the space of us sat here talking in the last, you know, 20 minutes, you know, there's probably been, you know, 100,000 purchasing decisions made. One of the most important things for a salesman to be able to understand, and why they need to be influential, is that they need to understand what the customer's known need is and what the customer's unknown need is. Now, the known need is, quite frankly, when the customer already has an understanding that he needs to buy X, whatever X might be. He's perhaps done some research on the internet. He may have invited you to come in and talk to you about it because he's already identified what that need is. Now, there's a lot of salespeople around who will just hone in on that, and the customer basically does the work for them. And for me, that's the difference between selling and order taking. They just become a glorified order taker. That's not about selling. There's the other type of salesperson who is influencing to be in a position to be able to understand and fulfill not only what the known need is, but what the unknown need is. For example, actually to look beyond and look much further into the future with regards to how their products and services can relate to that particular organisation. And in doing so, I think that creates a requirement for us to be influential with that customer. I mean, a term that is often used is the trusted advisor. Okay, so how do you get to that status? Well, the first thing is that I think as a salesperson, you have to understand that your role is to influence, not to sell. And I want to tell you why I feel that so strongly. If we took this camera crew and we went out onto the street down here in the middle of New York, and we walked up to 10 random people with the camera crew and we asked them the question, tell me, how would you like to be sold to? I guarantee you that the majority of them, which could be 6, it could be 9, may even be 10, will turn around to you and tell you, I don't like to be sold to. You see, that is something that's kind of ingrained within, you know, our psyche. We don't like to be sold to. However, if you then went and grabbed another 10 random people and you went to them and said, tell me, how would you like to be influenced? Then they will provide you with a whole array of different answers to that question. Some of them may be professionally based answers, some of them may be personally based answers, but the fact of the matter is what it's about is actually getting to know the individual. And our ability as individuals to influence is something that's innate within us. You know, I mean, we've been influencing since the day we were born. Admittedly, as babies, it was very crude. We screamed and shouted and you know, waved our hands and banged our feet and so on and so forth. But fundamentally, what we were trying to do was to influence people to change the nappy or feed us or, you know, entertain us in some way, shape or form. As we got older, that skill started to evolve. That natural skill started to evolve. We started to understand that it wasn't just about verbal communication, it was also about our body language and our tone. By the time we got to 16 or 17 years old, we understood exactly how to be able to influence our parents to lend us the car for the weekend. We knew the most appropriate way to ask that question. We knew that to get the right answer, we might have to give something back in return. When we then continued to develop and we started to meet people that were potentially partners for life, you know, we went about that in a particular process. We started to use listening skills. We started to understand what their needs and interests were and how they matched our needs and interests. We started to create solutions, if you will, or next dates based on what their interests were. And in many instances, I know for you and certainly for me, we actually also got people to make the positive decisions to us, which were decisions for life. which is, perhaps the greatest close in the world. So as individuals, we have this innate skill to be able to influence people because we're doing it all the time. When I walked in this room and you introduced me to the people who were in it, we're going through that process completely subconsciously about positively influencing. A lot of salespeople, they're so focused on their goal, their objective, their product or their service, that they miss out on all the stuff that actually creates the platform. And for me, that is the epitome of what I'm looking for in salespeople, who understand that what they bring to the party are the things that they are using all the time. And so I'm particularly more interested in some of their personal experiences and their greatest achievements from a personal perspective, and how they've gone about developing their life and developing the relationships within their lives, whether they be professional or personal. Because it's that stuff, for me, that creates the platform that will help me understand, are they going to fit into the type of team that I want to have? And are they going to be in a position to be able to work with my customers, fulfilling the values that I have and my organization has in the way in which I want them to do that? And that's not based on professional stuff, that's based on them as people. In many instances it's about their head, but it's also about their heart as well.
Is it better for an organization to hire experienced salespeople versus inexperienced salespeople?
I think it's important to have a balance. Extremes of anything, don't work. And we see that in so many different environments and scenarios. And one of the reasons why it's important to have a balance is because actually you do want to have people within your sales organization that others will look up to emulate. That's particularly important. And that goes back to, taking theory and making it reality. You take a bunch of people who have little experience and little knowledge, and you show them somebody who has lots of experience and lots of knowledge, and show them what the result of that is. All of a sudden they can see it. They have a goal, they have a target. And sometimes it's not just about their skills or their attitude, it's about, you'll find that they'll go and emulate what they were. They'll go to the same clothes shops and buy the same types of suits, and all of a sudden, they're wearing a tie and those kind of things, etc. Those are particularly important. And, we had enormous success in the UK with that business. It was an organisation that when we started was revenues of about $7 million, and when we finally sold it to private equity, nearly $100 million. It wasn't because we had the best salespeople, it was because we had the best sales management. Because when you are running a business, you need disciples, you need ambassadors, you need people that are going to be doing the stuff on a day-to-day basis that you simply don't have the bandwidth to be able to do. And those are those are the people that you rely on most. So for me, the sales manager was actually the most important, or the group of sales managers that we had.
What makes a successful sales manager? What are the qualities a sales manager need to have in order to drive and build a strong sales organization?
The likelihood is that when you're looking to recruit a sales manager, you're looking at somebody who is going to manage the various elements of the sales process and being able to do that effectively and efficiently. But the likelihood is if those people go back and they look at the job description that they've put together for sales management, the likelihood is if people management is mentioned, it is mentioned, it kind of gets two lines. For me, sales managers are about people management. And what they do is that they inspire people to want to work for them. That's huge. The reason why I come to work today isn't because I want to sell whatever the product is that I'm selling. The reason why I come to work today isn't because I like the office. The reason why I come to work today isn't because I think it pays me $5,000 a year more than another job that I once had. It's because I want to be inspired by that individual. I want to look up to that person and that individual, and I don't want to let them down. And that's another huge part of this, because what it does is that relationship creates a responsibility and an accountability, which we have to each other. So if you're looking to hire sales managers, spend far, far more time looking at their people management skills. It's really about, because everything that we do, whether we're selling to people within organizations, whether we are influencing people that work for us, whether we are inspiring people by communicating our company vision and our goals and getting people motivated to work towards that, all the skills are the same, because it's all about how we relate to the people that we are working with. And the great issue is, let's talk about results, because at the end of the day, that's why we're here, is to create results. It's not just to create nice places for people to work. You know, the fact of the matter is the results are everything. The problem is that a lot of organizations, they measure the result based on what it says in their budget. And the number that they have in their budget could have come from anywhere. It could be, you know, the shareholders want a 10% return this year, and that means the sales number needs to be X. Fine, okay. So we go and do that sales number of X, and the return's 10%, and we're all heroes. The opportunity, however, if doing it properly, could have been twice that. And we've missed that opportunity. We weren't even looking at it, because what we were doing was simply being focused on some number that's been picked out of the air based on some kind of objective. And unfortunately, because of that, we'll never really know why we achieved that number. It just happened. I have something that I call a visionary leadership model. And the visionary leadership model is based on 5 key components. And you can do this for an organization, you can do it for a team, you could also do it for an individual. The first one is to identify what's the prize? What is it we're looking to do? We want to create desire, okay? And that's not just based on the company goal, but it's also based on the goal for the individual. So it's not, and again, that's an important balance. It's about saying that, you know, we within the organization want the business to get to X. And if we do so, we believe that the individuals within the organization will also be rewarded. And that doesn't have to be monetary reward, by the way, you know. So the first element of that is actually to understand what is the prize. That's the creation of the desire and the goal. The second element to that is to understand the necessity. So why do we have to do this? You know, is it for competitive reasons? Is it for our corporate profile? Is it because it's based on the market opportunity that we have? All of those different kind of things. And they're different for different organizations. The third element is what's the know-how? What do we need from a know-how perspective, the knowledge within our organization to be able to fulfill those things? And identifying specifically what do we have today and comparing that with what we think we need. Identifying the gap and then putting a plan together to be able to fulfill that gap. The fourth element is what are the milestones? How are we going to measure this? What's the time scale that we're going to measure it over, and how are we going to communicate these milestones and these measurements to our people so that we can understand how we're tracking towards our goal and, if necessary, evolve the prize and the reward based on what it is that we're achieving. And the final thing is what are the values? That's the values that we are as an organization, as an employer, as a customer provider, as a member of a corporate community. What's our social responsibility? And as individuals within the organization, what are their values? How do we want them to represent us when they're talking to our customers, with honesty and with openness and so on? And this becomes what I call a visionary leadership model. And I help organizations to develop this within their business and then go about presenting that to their employees and supporting them to execute it.
So how do you define execution for the sales department?
People are very bright. We have a great ability to learn. You know, I always use the analogy of, you know, learning how to drive. You know, you have to be given the skills. Now, the theoretical skills and actually learning exactly how a car operates, that's the easy bit. We can take that on board. The real important thing is the execution. And within that particular analogy, the execution is paramount, because if we execute wrong, that could be fatal for ourselves, for people around us. So the first point I would make is learning is one thing, very important. But we've also then got to understand how they're going to execute on what they've learnt. There's one element that I believe is absolutely critical in people understanding, actually, and I'll go back to the driving analogy. One of the reasons why we drive and we execute our knowledge of driving in the way that we do, which pretty much most of the time is pretty safe, is because we have an understanding of a really important word. It's consequence. Because we know that the consequences of us not driving appropriately are enormous, you know, and profound, okay? Now let's relate that back to a sales organization, okay? We have all the skills, but we're not executing them properly. Well, the difference between selling and driving is that selling has nowhere near the same level of consequence. And so therefore that can affect how we actually go about executing that role of sales. And in the sales environment, one of the big things that we as sales leaders, sales managers and business leaders have to do is to make sure that people are aware of the consequences of poor execution. Every day there are millions of salespeople all over the world that pick up the phone, and within the first 30 seconds of that call they make such a complete hash of creating a platform to influence people that they'll want to be able to talk to them and create the desire to actually start a discussion in the first 30 seconds. And of course the answer is no, I don't want any, thank you very much. And they put the phone down. There's no consequence to that for the salesperson because they just pick the phone up again. And guess what they do? They do exactly the same again because there's no consequence for it, okay? And what in a role within a sales team and from a sales leadership role, we've got to demonstrate to people that the consequence of not taking advantage of the first 30 seconds, the most important, the most pivotal time in that first contact with a decision maker. I mean, I talked a little bit about milestones within my 5 elements of the visionary leadership model. Milestones are really important, and what that does is it creates sales targets, and that becomes those become factors that we measure people by, and they are exceptionally important to have. But we've also got to bear in mind that how those numbers were put together in the first place may be quite random and could be based on other information that may not relate to market opportunity or the skills base and know-how within the organisation and so on. Okay, so it is important to do that. But simply measuring somebody because they've achieved their target is really not the real measurement. I mean, that's a very short-term measurement. What I'm interested in is actually looking how people are able to sustain that achievement or overachievement over a period of time, because that certainly will indicate that they're doing things right, they're doing things properly. However, there's a question that I ask a lot of CEOs when I ask them about their sales organisation and how they feel that their sales organisation performs. I ask people, tell me, if you came into the office on Monday morning and walked into your sales organisation and you said to them, guys, I've got some great news for you. I have decided I'm going to give you the next 8 weeks off, paid vacation. What effect do you think that will have on your sales? Now, this is a very theoretical question, obviously. The answer to that question is quite interesting, because the likelihood is that for a period of time over that 8 weeks, the company will continue to sell. It will continue to have people calling in and with orders and with requirements and so on and so forth, etc. You know, the company's sales number won't fall off a cliff. It won't be developing, I accept and I appreciate that, but the reality is that the organisation has a level of momentum. And it's about trying to get people to think about what that level of momentum really is. Because if they understand that that level of momentum is actually considerably responsible for the achievement of the overall number, then you're starting to understand whether your sales organization is really performing or not. And the likelihood is it's not. The higher that momentum is, and what you've then got are people who are just basically servicing the need that you're creating demand for in other ways, through marketing and advertising or social media or whatever that might be. And I think that's a really important point, is to try and understand for leadership within organizations to see how responsible is the sales organization for actually meeting the number. And again, in exactly the same way as the salesperson is caught out being deceptive or manipulative with a customer, the same effect is true of a CEO, a leader within an organization who's caught out being deceptive and manipulative with the people. You have to be absolutely consistent. People have to be able to understand what your values are.
Most salespeople, they believe the reason people buy service or product is because of the price. Price is the main factor. Why do you think most salespeople cut prices?
It's the easy way out. The reason why they do it is because they haven't done all the other good stuff up front, to be quite frank with you. Why do people have difficulty closing? You know, there's an interesting answer to that. Nobody likes to be told no. So we don't ask the question. If you're fearful of being told no, then you ignore the question. It's as simple as that. It's human psyche. In the same way, as far as price is concerned, if you're looking for ways to motivate somebody to buy from you, the easiest thing that you can do, the lowest hanging fruit that you can do, the lowest barrier to entry, is to throw price into the mix. So, Mr. Customer, I'd really like to do business with you, and I think the best way for me to be able to do that and for you to make a positive decision in terms of talking to me is actually for me to reduce the price that I first discussed with you. Actually, for most people, most buyers, they're probably sat there, they're either thinking to themselves, great, I've got it cheaper, I was going to buy it anyway, or they're actually thinking to themselves, well, I was starting to like you, now I'm not. Because you're undoing any good work that you've done as far as being influential and trusted advisor. And I'm not suggesting price isn't important. And I'm not suggesting that people won't go into a negotiation on price, but there's a platform, which is a firm platform to have that discussion. It's not throwing price at the customer as a reason for him to buy, because you can't think as a salesperson of any better reason to give him. And what's interesting is, in talking to a lot of salespeople, one of the things that I say to them is that you actually have a much greater insight into that buyer's mind than you've ever really considered, you've ever really thought of. Because funny enough, you are also a buyer. You buy things all the time. You buy cars, or you buy houses, or you buy electronic equipment for the home, or you buy vacations, or you go to the grocery store, or you buy things. Some are trivial items, day-to-day stuff. Some are much more important decisions where there are more factors involved in that decision-making process. So you tell me, how do you like to buy? And the salespeople, they'll talk to you. They will tell you, well, I want value, yeah, but I want to be able to get the right quality. And I want this, and I want... Right, okay. So tell me, why is it that the people that you're selling to would be any different in their buying criteria than the criteria that you have just outlined to me? Oh, well, there's a novel way of looking at it. It goes back to this kind of very basic concept of, let's put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And we can do that because actually we are in their shoes a lot, sometimes every day. We buy things for our companies. In some of the workshops that I've done, I've actually taken the CFO of the business that I'm working for and said to him, I want you to come in. I want you to give me 30 minutes of your time. I'm not going to even prepare you. But you're the person in the organization who fundamentally has a responsibility for purchasing within this business. Okay? I want you to come in. And I'll sit him down in the front of the room and say, okay, now, you fit the criteria in the profile of all the people that our sales group here are going to be selling to. Now I need to sit down and put my feet up and have a bit of a sleep because I'm tired. Now you tell them how to sell to you. And that buyer will sit there and he will tell them the things that are important. He'll talk to them about the value. They'll talk to them about where price comes in. He'll talk to them where relationship. He'll talk to them about how he wants to be communicated with. All those great things. It's not in books. We have it here within our businesses, you know. So there's all this great stuff that we can use, but we don't. Get people to take their blinders off and look peripherally around them and look at what information they have and what's available to them to be able to give them the greatest possible opportunity to be able to execute.
What do you think made your company successful in the past?
It's the easiest question in the world to answer. It's the people. And a multi-leveled people. If I look at the business in the UK, which was originally called Interquad, became QA when we bought the QA business. We had an executive management group, 5 people. We were totally in sync with each other. We didn't necessarily agree with each other all the time, but we had a great leader in our chairman, Chris Martin, who was my great mentor, who I'd been working with since the early 90s. And we were completely aligned. We had honesty, we had openness, we had trust. We could talk about anything. And that was very much seen and reflected within the rest of the organization. And we built that type of approach within the next layers around a flat structure. We were in a position to be able to bring people into the organization, and because of that platform and foundation that we'd created, we could be visionary, we could be influential, we could get them to buy into it. One of the things that I used to talk about a lot was, particularly in the early days, but it was kind of part of that milestone. I like giving people, images that they can see in their minds and they can relate to. That we were a business that was at the bottom of the mountain. The mountain was the market, and we were climbing it, and we were going to reach the top. And when we reached the top, we were going to stick our flag on there, and we were going to look down at everybody else around us, and we were going to survey what we'd achieved. And that was the kind of visualization that we created, and we brought people into the business, and they came in and they understood the type of team approach, a lot of hard work, but a lot of fun as well, They understood that within that business, the relationships between people were really important. And all of that excitement and energy and all those positive factors, they reflect on everybody else. They reflected on our partners and our suppliers. They wanted to do business with us. They reflected on our customers, because we were the fastest growing thing. Everybody loves to jump on the back of the fastest growing thing. Success and lack of success is contagious. The more successful you are, the more successful you become. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the same way, when there isn't the performance that you want, unless you do something very different to change that and to arrest that, then again it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we'd done was that we'd created within the core of the business this great environment and this great energy for being successful. And we had these very specific milestones that had been laid out, which we continued to achieve. And that became contagious. And so what happens is, within the organization, the spirit and the culture and the environment of positivity and of achievement, that's in the majority. And it becomes very difficult for people that are in the minority, the naysayers, I don't think it's going to work, or, it's raining today, and all that kind of stuff. They get drowned out. And in actual fact, what happens is they join the bandwagon. They become the right people because there is no alternative. The alternative is to exit. Go and work somewhere where there's a bunch of people who, sitting there like this, you know, and not enjoying it, and, you know, not being part of it, and not being challenged by it, okay? And the business has to create the right environment for people to do that. That right environment, in many instances, and certainly within a sales organisation in particular, is giving people the ability to do the job that you want them to do. Yeah, the business may have issues and challenges along the way, you know, in terms of we don't have, you know, enough of that product to send out to meet customer demand, or we wish that cash flow was better, or, you know, we wish we were collecting cash faster, or whatever, etc. But that's noise. That's stuff that just has to be handled. Keep that away from the business, you know? Because the salesman that you're relying on to go out there with this positive energy and with this mission to influence a buyer, to bring him on board, this great, you know, wagon train that you've got rolling through the countryside of growth and development and quality and high values and so on and so forth, he doesn't want to hear about all the other stuff. He doesn't want to hear that the CFO's tearing his hair out because he wishes his number of debtor days were, you know, 20% better. It's not important.